All right. So welcome, Adam. Thanks a million for coming here. I just um, for any of the students who mightn't be aware of what it is you do. So you are the creator and presenter, producer of Attaboy, Clarence and The Secret History of Hollywood, amongst various other things that when I tried to figure out exactly all the things you do, I kind of ran out of energy. So we might talk about those things as well. But yeah, thanks so much to come today. So this is part of a media careers seminar we've been running, where we've had people coming in from doing all sorts of different jobs related to film and media generally, just to give students a sense of what's involved in those jobs, the kinds of skills you need, the kinds of activities that make up the jobs, and then just to talk a little bit about what excites you and all those things. So yeah, I'm very excited. We've had Oscar nominated directors and screenwriters and cinematographers on here, but I think this is the most starstruck I've been, because Adam, you literally have been in my head for the last well, at least 5 years. So
it's been very comfortable there, Con. Thank you very much for all the biscuits.
I think I mentioned previously on Twitter, there have been I remember where certain events happened in the stories that you were telling on your podcasts, and they've kind of intertwined with my own personal life, the stories of Val Luton and Jimmy Cagney and all sorts of people, which has been great. So yes, so we might start. I mean, actually, I know what I want to start with. I was reading an article in which the New Statesman was writing about your podcast, and they described your podcasting success as a fairy story. So has it felt like a fairy story to you?
It really has, actually. Yeah. I mean, I remember I think I started podcasting when I was 38. Yeah. I'm 44 now. So 6 years I've been doing it. And I was kind of settled on life's path, should we say. My direction was set, I had children, had a sort of job that wasn't really going anywhere, was literally envisaging just working at it until I was 60 and then living off my state pension, and just making. I think I've even said it a few times that my children count as the thing that I'm leaving to the world.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, I just decided to one day strike out on something different, and it's worked out incredibly well. I think fairy tale is a very nice and very appropriate way of putting it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's amazing, because even when I mentioned to people I knew outside of film about that I was talking to you, there were so many people who I wouldn't have thought were big classical Hollywood film lovers who knew of your podcast. So it's gotten
thank you.
So much attention. It's great and well deserved.
Thank you.
So yeah, so basically, as I said, your main two gigs anyway, well, it started out with Attaboy Clarence, in which you have lots of fun and you talk about classical movies that you've seen, and you play old time radio dramas, and then Secret History of Hollywood, in which you delve in a little more detail into particular stories from the history of Hollywood. So obviously the common denominator there is classical Hollywood and old movies. So what is it what is it you love about classical movies?
I think I'm attracted to that. I always say that period in history, but then I remember there were 2 world wars and a flu pandemic. So I kind of think it wasn't that time in history. I think it was more the fact that people had different ideals in those times, Like, I've got an autograph book from the 30s, and it's filled with people that are, explorers or writers, or scored 100 at Lords or something like that. They all achieve something. You just imagine being with them in that moment, and everyone was very not so focused on. Well, they were focused on possessions, but not so much on getting ahead, but contributing towards society. And I think old movies, for some reason, seem to exemplify that. And I really just love that attitude. I like the fact that heroes were people who put thoughts and ideas into the world. So when you see stories about them, and they're all relatively short as well, because my brain can't handle long stories, ironically, since I make the longest podcast in the world. But yeah, So I just really admire the time. I admire the fashions. I love the look of it. It's almost like if I could travel back and avoid the world wars, then yeah, I think I would go back in time.
So it's like Midnight in
it's a natural
Paris.
fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's a perfect way of putting it. Yeah, if I could just walk back and spend a couple of evenings per week there, then yeah, I need to get in touch with Owen Wilson and find out how it was done.
Yeah. Or do you remember that short-lived TV series with Rodney from Only Fools and Horses?
Good Night, Sweetheart.
Yes.
That's it's funny you should mention that. I had a bit of a marathon on those at the beginning of the pandemic. I watched them all through, and every single episode I thought, I wish I could find an alley that would take me back in time. Great minds, Con.
So they present a kind of perhaps a simpler time, or a more idealistic time, perhaps also an idealized time when we look back at it.
I think it's idealized because I'm sure that people back then, even the people who were, swigging champagne at the top of Manhattan skyrises and wearing tucks and tails to dinner every night, I'm sure they had their share of problems. But yeah, I mean, there was a depression and there was a world war and a pandemic and there was poverty. But I don't know. I think perhaps in 80 years' time, people will look back on the 2020s and go, "Oh, what a golden halcyon era that was."
Sure.
so I think it's just that I'm an utter nostalgic. So I'll always find a period that I'd rather be in.
No, I can definitely empathize with that. And it's funny, like over the last year when we've all been escaping from our little worlds, for me, myself, the 30s and 40s has often been the place I wanted to escape to. Also,
it's just such a comfort, isn't it? It's like wrapping a blanket around yourself. I watch the movies all day. Even try and eat the food, like cook the dishes that they make. I go to bed listening to old time radio, and I write about these people all day long, which is a true honor. So yeah,
I find you do need to be careful sometimes. I watch a lot because it's my area of research. I watch a lot of 30s and 40s melodramas, and I sometimes do find myself having to stop myself asking my wife, would she sacrifice everything for me at the drop of a hat? Because your ideas of gender relations, for example, can become a little.
It's very true. I'm always worried about that. My kids are going to watch too many movies from the 30s, and go into a bar, meet a man, and end up being proposed to and married the next day, which is basically how all of those stories work. Oh, you're very nice. Should we get married? Yeah, let's spend our lives together.
I know. Simple times.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, so obviously there's lots of people out there who love old movies, and lots of them listen to your podcast. But so tell us a little bit about how then you turned what was just a hobby, and presumably you intended the podcast to be just a hobby when it first started. So how did that start out, and what was
well, I actually had big plans for it. This was my plan. My plan was that I was going to I wanted to write for Empire magazine, and because I liked films. I specifically liked old films. So I thought, what a great career that's going to be. All I need to do is write a letter, obviously, and they'll hire me on the spot. But then I thought, no, it's probably best if I have a body of work. So I started writing reviews for old films, and I was listening to lots of podcasts at the time because I was driving for a living. And I just thought to myself, why aren't I recording these and putting these out as a podcast? So my end game was always this. I was going to write for Empire magazine, become a great, film authority. Then I was going to write a book, which is really easy to do once you've written for a magazine for 5 minutes. Then that book was going to be adapted for the screen, and I was going to get an Oscar. That was basically my path to glory.
You're at least halfway there at this stage.
Well, it's really funny you should say it. So basically, I started recording these reviews I was writing. Then I decided to become a bit more ambitious because the podcast was Attaboy, Clarence, and it was just movie reviews and old time radio, which were two things I loved. So I decided to go a bit more in depth and write the story of the Sherlock Holmes movies, which, with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, which are my favorite series. So I thought, well, I could do a retrospective 2-hour episode on that. And the more I wrote, the more I kind of thought, well, maybe this is a good idea for a show too. So I kept putting these larger shows every 5 episodes or something on Attaboy, Clarence, and the whole feed became a bit messy. Like some people would come for the reviews, some people would come for the longer ones. So I split them apart, and I made The Secret History of Hollywood as the the more in-depth one. And I've carried on with both, because Attaboy Clarence for me is it's a lovely palate cleanser in between these huge long projects that drain you completely. So I find that a good weekly reminder of why I fell in love with old movies in the first place is needed.
Sure.
But yeah, the shows have evolved. They both evolved really. So yeah, I enjoy them immensely, and I couldn't do one without the other either. I don't think so. They both they serve either side of my brain.
That's really interesting, and yeah, and I want to kind of come back to that question about how you just actually the process of putting them together, and I guess the demand that makes on you. But I mean, just to a little bit go in a little more detail about that idea of how they, the format that they took and how they evolved. Because obviously, I mean, 2014, I'm trying to think back to what the podcasting landscape was like then.
It was very different. I was very lucky, actually. I think I just snuck under the rug before it had a real boom. I think Serial had just come out when I launched first, and I was very into hardcore history. And so many people are, obviously, but I remember thinking to myself, well, these longer shows are possible. People like them. And I remember looking at his Twitter account and saying, oh, he's got 200,000 followers. It can't be unpopular to do a longer show. So I started doing longer and longer. And I've always been a bit of a frustrated writer anyway. I tried writing a novel for 10 years, and I've got like 50 drafts of this thing, and none of them go past chapter 3. So my problem is that I have a story in my head, but I just can't seem to work out where everything fits. Like, I can write okay, but I can't work out the story itself. Like, what happens to that character in the next scene and the next scene? But when it comes to translating history, it's there for you. It's up to you to write the blanks in, which is a very crude way of putting it. But I found that formula seems to click better for me. Like taking a true life story where everything's already worked out in terms of structure, and then I make it interesting, or make it dramatic or something. But so the longer shows, they kind of started off very documentary fashion, I would say. Like the Sherlock Holmes show is just basically a rundown of the films, a small review of each film and what was going on in their lives at the time and anything else they were up to. And then the second one was called Sex in Monochrome, and that was slightly longer. And I thought, it's a good subject to do. Pre-code sex in cinema. I decided to avoid violence because it's too broad a term, but sex is it's a bit more, I don't know, it's a bit more, I don't know, intriguing, I guess, for listeners as well. I was trying to go for a bit sensational, but so I did the same sort of thing. Sorry?
You put sex in the title and double your listenership.
Exactly. And yeah, I did as well. I can't complain. So I decided to, do sex. So it was the same kind of thing, really, rundown of all the films I could find in the pre-code era. But I decided to go back a bit further and find out, why the attitudes were that way at the time, and why the Catholic Legion of Decency came into effect, and what was happening with censorship all over the place, and who were the people that were making these films, and who were the people that were pushing for these films to be seen, and who were the ones pushing against. And I guess, I don't know, the more I did it, I'd say the better I got, but the better I got at research, definitely. And the more I found my own style. I didn't have a style before. It was just trivia, the end. There was some pleasant music going behind it. But I think because I've been so into old time radio, which has really, really, changed the shape of my brain almost. I can't, have a conversation without some kind of background music and, some dramatic kind of lilting melody behind it. So I think, coupled, if you put all those things together, Hollywood stories, research history, dramatic, effects, and all through audio, we arrive at what I'm making now, which are essentially, they began as documentaries, but they slowly, I think, become more biopics. The more I found my own style, now I'm, dramatizing entire lives of people. It's a great privilege, but I'm very slow at what I do because I'm trying to be as respectful as possible to these people too.
It certainly is that. I mean,
thank you.
I remember so your Secret History Holiday was recommended to me by a good friend of mine who's probably listening here today, and I remember putting on Bullets and Blood, the first episode, and whatever, I remember also looking and going, oh my God, look at the length of that. And then whatever, I don't know what I was expecting, but when I heard the opening scene of Bullets and Blood, where we are, cast back into the kind of prehistory of the Warner Brothers family, and I hadn't heard anything like it, and I was just immediately caught up in it, and I mean I think what became obvious is well, I know why these podcasts are so long, because essentially they're like audiobooks that you're producing that take us into this world and immerse us. And so one of the things I was really curious about was about, because you're not just describing what's happening, you are kind of taking us into that moment. So there's presumably, there's a degree of poetic license, as it were, and that you're sort of allowing this moment to be created, as it were. I'm really interested in your process for doing that. Because I think it's what's really, really incredible about the podcast is, I feel like I've gone through some of Val Luton's most, traumatic moments with him, and all of these different things. And you use that word respect there, which I think is really interesting, about respecting these people's lives. So yeah, I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, going into that fine-grained detail of these events that unfolded and recreating.
Thank you. Well, thanks. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a very long question.
No. It's very kind of you. So I think the whole thing changed really with Bullets and Blood, which is ironically the first series you listened to, because before that they were very, as I say, documentary style. And I didn't really quote people unless the quotes were there, But then when Bullets and Blood came along, the story was so different. I mean, it didn't even mean for it to be the story of the Warner Brothers to begin with. It was going to be Warner gangster movies, like a universe of gangsters, basically, a universe of horrors I've done. I'm going to do a universe of gangsters. I just love gangster films. So, who do you start with? You start with James Cagney, of course. So, and it's all at Warner Brothers. So let's do a brief history of the Warner Brothers. I thought, just a quick page on who they were, where they came from and stuff. So, I got as many resource materials as I could and just opened them up and just sat there for the whole day going, oh my God, this is the story. This is the one to tell. This is not, we can put gangsters in anywhere. But this is it's like Game of Thrones in old Hollywood. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, what a story. So I started writing it, and I couldn't seem to do it justice with this documentary-ish kind of style. It was just, I don't know, it just didn't, the beats weren't hitting right. I think I wrote about 40 pages and thought, I'm not as involved as I want to be in this story. So I just basically rebooted the entire podcast series and just said, look guys, from now on, I'm not making documentaries anymore. I'm making biopics. And when it comes to things like dialogue and shall we say, I mean, I have to simulate dialogue, obviously. But my approach to that is, if I know a meeting happened between a character and another character, for instance, and I know what the outcome of that meeting was, then I just have to basically simulate the dialogue, because you can get across so much in terms of character, in terms of where it's going to go. You can put clues as to that will hit later on in the story. You can do anything. You can do so much more with dialogue than you can with just saying they had a conversation, they fell out, and he swore that he would kill him one day or something. It just falls flat. Sure. So I took the decision to. I mean, obviously I do make up the dialogue, but I don't make up what happened. Yeah. I think, as long as you stick to the core truth behind it, then it's basically like watching Mank or any other biopic, really. It's just the case of I've dramatized the truth. So now I dramatize the truth, but I do it in an audio way, but I combine it as well with lots of documentary facts and side stories to put you further into the time, give you a bit more context. I don't know. I mean, I've heard people say that it's a style that's all my own, which is very flattering. I'm sure there are other people out there doing it, but but I think, you know, I'm way more comfortable now with the style that it's become than I was before. I don't think I think it was fun to listen to, but I wasn't as emotionally connected to it as I am now, which I think is crucially important. And also, I mean, I think, you know, say this without, you know, sounding immodest, but I think they become better shows. I think, you know, they become more about the people than about the films. I think if a podcast listener who's up for a new show looks at the podcast, they're not going to. They can say it was about old films. I'm not interested in those. Whereas my shows are not really about old movies. They're about the people. They're about the stories of what was happening. They're about the world at the time, and they're about, you know, basic human things like romance and love and death and tragedy and betrayal. And it just so happens that they're all set in old Hollywood. Absolutely. So I think they become a lot more, I don't know, they're a lot more, they have more appeal now to people. I think they become more human than they were, perhaps. Sure. Sorry, that was a very long-winded answer.
No, I mean, I agree. I really enjoy the universal, and it's great. The great kind of almost like watch-alongs. You can listen.
Yeah,
you're not going to watch those 4 films, and then and it's great to hear, you know, the history of those films. But as you say, that wider social history and human history does allow for a scope that brings something new to it. And I mean, you have those amazing set pieces like, you know, Jimmy Cagney's like 2-day street brawl.
Oh yeah, his 3-day brawl with the kid in the yeah. I love the payoff on that as well. There's a scene like in part 2 where that kid writes to him from like an insane asylum that he's been put into because he obviously wasn't ever right in the head or whatever. You know. Yeah. And sort of Jimmy sends him these, you know, he's like, well, you know, I've got nothing against him now. So he sends him this big care package of, you know, shirts and chocolate and cigarettes and stuff. Never hears from him again. But I don't know. It's just the like all of these moments, they seem to have payoffs down the line. That's especially true with the series I'm writing at the moment. But there's all these parts in the one I'm writing right now that seem to somehow take you back through memory to set pieces of part 1. So sorry.
I mean, I'm jumping around a bit here, but I presume are you referencing Cary in?
Yeah. So Cary part 2 is I've nearly finished writing that one now, but I mean, I'm extraordinarily proud of it. It's gone way better than I thought it would. I thought it would be kind of a nothing show, and I was a bit worried about, you know, because it's just the 30s and what really happens to him during that. But because of this style that I write in, I think I've managed to pack so much in there that's going to mean even more down the road. I'm sorry, I know I'm talking nonsense. No,
you're making me very excited to hear. Thank you. And I mean, so, and even as you describe that there, it sounds like a lot of it emerges as you write. Do you know going in, like, say if we take Cary, which has, you know, this really interesting, the first part, flashback structure, or flash forward structure, I should say, that do you know, like, do you find the structure of the podcast as you write it, or do you have a sense when you're going into it what that's going to be?
So when I was planning Cary, I thought to myself, I wanted to do it in 3 acts, basically. The first was going to be his sort of early life and the beginnings into film. And the second part was going to be his film career. And then I thought the third part could be after, because he had, you know, a good 30 years after he finished in Hollywood, where so much happened to him. Like his daughter was the biggest thing. You know, he finally became a father in his 60s. He became a brand ambassador for Fabergé and flew all over the world. And, you know, all his friendships with his co-stars like Grace Kelly and Hitchcock and Ingrid Bergman, they all continued and they all grew old together, and he had to watch them all die. And it was just a fascinating kind of that's a really poignant way to finish his story, you know, because everyone just knows him for the films, really. And all these marriages and LSD, and it was just a great, you know, I thought, wow, part 3. But I got the sense that people were going to go, well, I know all about his films now, so why would I listen to part 3? So And also, the more I looked into it, the more I thought, well, part one's going to be about 8 hours, part two's going to be about 8 hours, and part three's going to be about 37 hours. So I had to find some way of balancing it out while getting all this really valuable story into the other parts. And the more I looked at his later life, the more I found sort of callbacks to his past. Like, he was trying to be a great parent because he didn't have great parents, and he wanted her to have a charmed life because he didn't have a charmed life. So it almost becomes not a story of Cary Grant, but a story of parents and children and the things we do for them or things we don't do for them. So the framing device became sort of a natural fit, really. It was why aren't I telling it in the present and going back to the past and then back to the present again? So I've taken the last 4 years of his life and I've interwoven each of those years with a huge period of his past, and it works. I think it definitely works, and I think it also acts as like a palate cleanser to all the misery that's going on as well. I get to play around in the 80s as well, which is something I've never been able to do before. I'm always in the 30s and 40s. Yeah. I don't know. I'm really having fun with it. It's a great thing to write about, and I think it's a bit unexpected as well. I don't think people were expecting all the modern stuff, and I don't think they were expecting anything outside of the films. I mean, he's only just got to Hollywood by the end of part one, and that was shamefully 12 hours long. The part two, I mean, part two is 1933 to 1940, and it's at the moment 15 hours long, and I can't seem to cut it down. But I mean, there's more characters. Bless you.
I was driving from Dublin to Galway when suddenly it became 1984. I nearly crashed.
I had the guy who I can't remember which TV show he makes now, but he sent me a message on Twitter saying, "Excuse me, I think there's something wrong with your episode." I was listening to it, and all of a sudden Nick Kershaw started playing. No, you're right. Just keep listening for a second. You'll see what I did.
And how do you decide on your topics, on your subjects? I mean, you're going to spend a lot of time with this person, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have been accused of just covering the characters I like to cover, but I think if I'm going to spend 2 or 3 years in the company of someone, I don't want it to be someone I detest and don't want to humanize, and if they were awful people. So I do, hands up, I'm guilty of that. I only write about people that I want to write about because I've already got so many stories I'm going to be able to tell. But Cary Grant and James Cagney, probably my favorite movie stars of all time. I love the Warner gangster movies. I've done those now. I love the Universal horror movies. I've done those now. I love the Basil Rathbone movies. I've done them. So I mean, I've done Audrey Hepburn's early life, which was that was particularly intriguing to do that.
That was an incredible story.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
I didn't know that story that you told in that about her. I mean, for those, you might say a little about what her early life was.
She was the daughter of a Dutch baroness and a financier father from England, and he wasn't the greatest father, should we say. Nazi sympathizer. Tried to get his wife to become a Nazi sympathizer, but she flirted with it and then thankfully didn't. And Audrey was mistakenly caught up in the war in Holland and suffered like you wouldn't believe before she even got to her teens, and she was almost starved to death, had to dig through the dirt to find tulip bulbs to eat and make bread out of grass. And
escaped from the back of a truck.
A rape truck, yeah. They used to trawl the city, the German soldiers, and just snatch girls from the streets. And she was one of the girls they snatched one time. And she recounts it in vivid detail. She says, I was in a truck with 10 other girls, and we were off to the barracks to be, pillaged and probably shot in the head and dumped in a shallow grave afterwards. And she managed to escape because the truck stopped so that the soldiers who were driving it could get out and murder a Jewish boy in front of her. So she managed to escape and managed to get home, miraculously survived the war. She was the same age as Anne Frank as well, who was always a like a hero to her forevermore, because she shared so much in terms of, you know, age and experience, and then went on to have this fairy tale Hollywood career. So I thought the story there is not the Hollywood career that everyone knows about and has been done to death. The story is her early life. So I wrote, just, you know, she just makes Roman holiday and walks up to the stage to get her Oscar, and that's where my story finishes. So
It was a really great creative decision, I have to say. It was, you know,
thanks, man.
yeah, I mean, you must really, I mean, as you say, these are, you pick people you obviously care about to write about in the first place, but you must really grow to love them, if that's not too strong a word, as you.
No, I do. I remember getting to the end of the Hitchcock series and and literally weeping because I wasn't going to be able to spend any more time with him, and he was dead too. I couldn't bring him back or anything, you know. He died, and the whole point of that series was to say he wasn't great all the time, you know, but he was a human being, and they're very complicated people. And when I remember reading that line out at the end, and it was a bit more, it was a bit better written than that. And then thinking, oh no, that's it, that's me and Hitchcock finished. The same with Val Lewton as well, you know, what a guy, creative spirit and a true visionary. And finishing his story was quite an emotional moment, especially because no one's really done his story before. You know, that there are some slim biographies, and they all seem to be padded with the other movies of the time. This is what he influenced, and this is, you know, what was happening in the world and stuff. I thought, yeah, enough of that. Tell me about him. I want to know about him. So when I was writing it, you know, fortuitously, Brooke Darnell, who works at the Library of Congress, she got in touch and said, I've started listening to your Val Lewton series. I think I'd written parts 1, 2, and 3 by then. She said, I work in the Library of Congress and I have access to Lewton's papers. Would you like to see them? So yes, please. So she spent, I think, 4 weeks scanning letters, documents, every scrapbooks, diaries, everything. This stuff's never been seen before.
Really? No one's ever used them?
No, I mean, there's been a couple of letters, but nowhere near the. I mean, there's stuff that wasn't even catalogued that she sent to me.
Wow.
And I still have thousands and thousands of documents that she sent over that I didn't even get to use because I was so far into the writing by the time they came. And it just gave him a voice. It gave him a soul, you know. I mean, I always said that, you know, I gave him a voice, but Brooke gave him his soul. And it's like, it makes me so proud to have completed that project in particular, because it's like the definitive Lewton document. You can't really, you know, there's nothing else you can know about the man now. You know how he felt on certain days. You can hear his voice in the letters he wrote to Ruth. And everyone's just, you know, sort of gone, oh, well, he made movies at RKO. He died early. No one's really gotten to the heart of him before. So,
and I think what's amazing as well is how you you bring a focus to these films that, as you say, haven't got, you know, I mean, they have to some extent. I mean, it's not like Val Lewton his films aren't recognized as being distinct, but as you say, they haven't received the kind of critical attention that they deserve. Like for me, a film like Ghost Ship, I had never seen that before, and that was I fell in love with that film. That was such a fantastic.
Oh, it's so good. It's a hypnotic film, isn't it? It's brilliant. Yeah, all of his works have something about them. Like even Youth Runs Wild and Mademoiselle Fifi, they're not successful films, I would say, but you can definitely see what he was trying for. And there are moments in all of his stuff where he touches something in your soul that you go, oh, I felt that before, or yeah, I know exactly how that character is feeling right now, or how unfair, or how joyous. He was incredible writer, incredible producer and creator. Love him.
Have you any ambitions to go and do some more archival research? Having done some of it myself, it's I know how addictive it is, you know, to be sitting surrounded by these documents. So, you know, I remember seeing a letter, just a check signed by Alfred Hitchcock, and you know, you could just, I think the library of the Academy in LA is possibly one of my favorite places in the world. It's just incredible. So
Wow.
have you any kind of desire to go and spend some more time with
I'd love to, yeah. It might well activate my kleptomania in some way. I might try and stick a document under my shirt or
they do keep a very close eye on you, I've noticed.
something. But I'm fast. My pride and joy actually is I have a signed Myrna Loy picture up there,
Oh,
and
wow.
I have a letter that James Cagney wrote to a man in Reading, actually, who lived in the UK, who was just one of his friends. He just wrote him a letter. I got that as well. So yeah, I do think there is something quite magical about knowing that James Cagney touched that paper, or signed that paper, or took the trouble to send it away. So yeah, I would love to do that. That sounds like a plan. We should do that together.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I was there about to go in there on the 10th of March last year.
No way.
I was in Los Angeles waiting to go in, and they sent me an email saying the library's closed.
I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah, it's weird to see.
Is that where you are now? You're just waiting outside. It's a motel.
Very nicely decorated. So
Yeah, it's lovely.
yeah. So and is there? I mean, have you? Like one of the things that you again your podcasts are sort of and the Secret History in particular is known for is the these tangents you go on where you kind of, as you say, contextualize the story by talking about related stories. You must have a lot of fun with that, like discovering those, exploring those.
Yeah, I love that. That's like the fun part, really. It's like it's just all these little diversions you can take, because I always take them if I can as well. It's like, didn't have to tell anyone about the Ifland ring in the Hitchcock series. It's completely doesn't mean anything to the Hitchcock story, but half a page of research that I was just so taken with. This like fabled ring that passes from German actor to German actor, and only on their death as well. Like, what a crazy story. And things like the war, the Second World War things that Hitchcock had to look at and study for a documentary that he was going to make that never came through in the end. I love all that stuff because it kind of gives you more of an idea of the time and why people were acting the way they did. I mean, Bullets and Blood is full of gangster stories, real life gangster stories that they were just they're so much fun to research and write about. The trick is like getting them in there and trying to get back to the main story in a seamless way.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work.
I was going to ask you, I mean, because I find when I'm listening to it, I get so immersed in it, I kind of forget what we were doing. And then we get back to the story. And what I find really impressive is I'm always straight back in. So, but it must, I mean, maybe to ask a wider question rather than just tell you how wonderful you are. I can see how that has evolved. Like I've been listening to the Hitchcock, over the last year, I was listening to the Hitchcock podcast series, and I could see the storytelling chops evolving as it went on, and also doing things like you had Hitchcock's voice in, which obviously as you eradicate that from you don't have any of that in your podcast now, but also there were moments where you say something happened in Hitchcock's career. When I was listening, I was thinking, I think you'd probably get more dramatically out of that moment now than maybe you did then. Just that there would, that you would have framed it in a way. I'm basically saying you're kind of. It feels like your storytelling has evolved over the period.
Yeah, I think it's become. I can't really put it into any better sort of phrasing than I think I've found my voice over time. I think like with Cary, I'm writing it sometimes, and I'm thinking, God, I haven't talked about what was happening in 1935 at any point during this bit, but I somehow seem to have managed to convey, how Cary Grant felt taking his mother out of an asylum. That to me is more. I don't know. It's more about trying to find, especially when emotions are involved. Like this part I'm writing at the moment is all about how he was feeling at certain times and how his marriage broke down and what it was like to reconnect with a parent he thought was dead, and the death of his father and falling in love and falling out of love and stuff like that. You can't write that stuff by just saying he fell out of love or she fell out. you have to kind of make it psychologically authentic, because I want people to emotionally connect with him, so that when they get to the end of the episode, they say, God, I feel like I know Cary Grant now. I feel like I know him up until 1940. I know how he felt as a child. What a guy, or what an ass hat, or but I think you can't really do that with documentary style storytelling, and I think it was important in bringing, when you want to bring someone to life, I think it's not so much about telling you what they did, it's more about showing you how they felt, or trying to connect your soul to theirs is a way of I guess that's why the writing had to evolve, because it's the only way of doing it.
One of the things that's come up in the chats we've been having over the last few weeks with people who do all sorts of different jobs, but it's something about expertise maybe, or about becoming more comfortable in a role that you do, that over time you start to trust your instinct, maybe, that something feels right, or you get do you feel that way, that you're now more confident that no, actually whatever way feels right will be right, as it were?
When I wrote Bullets and Blood, the first part, it was such a departure on the podcast. Everything was very fact-based before. It's fact-based still, but it was very cut and dry documentary style. And I put the first part out, and I think the first sort of 5 or 6 messages I got were, this is great, I love this, I love this new direction you're taking. And then I started getting lots of other messages saying, this isn't the same anymore, I don't like it. And I got iTunes reviews saying that, that's it, I'm not going to listen anymore. And for a while I did think to myself, have I made a mistake? And have I, should I have stuck to what was working, or should I have actually followed my gut and gone with it this way? And I think you can't tailor what needs to come out of you to 1 or 2 dissenting voices. You have to go because at the end of the day, it's lovely that people listen to my shows, and of course I thrive on putting stuff out there and hopefully people enjoying it. And it's changed my life, totally changed my life, telling these stories. But I can't alter the way I write now, and I wouldn't ever go back to doubting again, because I wouldn't be fulfilled. I have to make the shows for myself. It has to be the show I would want to listen to. It has to be the account of Cary Grant's life that I would want to hear or see or feel. The same with Val Luton and the Warner Brothers. It has to be the way I need it to be. And if other people like it, then that's kind of a bonus to it. But yeah, you have to follow your instincts when you're creating things, I think, because otherwise you're making it for 6 or 7 people who expressed disappointment. And you'll look back on it. I always imagine that I'm going to have an attic full of these things. I'm going to get them out when I'm 75 or 80 years old, and I'm going to say, am I still proud of these? And press play. And I think if I'm making them for Lenin, Lanarkshire, then I don't think I will be proud. So I have to make them for me.
Absolutely, it's a bit like as a teacher, you always have to overcome the instinct not to focus on the one person who looks bored and go, I'm going to win that person over.
Yeah.
They're probably just tired because they have a job they were up all night working, or whatever it might be. So yeah,
that's so true.
But just actually to talk a little bit about that, about audience and developing an audience, because you were able to go from doing this, alongside doing a full-time job to making this your full-time job. I mean, that must be amazing.
That's it's such a, like I said at the beginning, when I got to 38 and even into 40, I still wasn't, it wasn't my full-time job then. It was still just a side thing I did. But to think that suddenly you can make a switch and do something you love and have always aspired to doing throughout your entire life. It was just, and it was always, there. I should have started earlier, basically. But yeah, to have built an audience and to make a living and to do it all day long, it's just a dream come true. I can't even put it into words, to be honest. I honestly thought my path was set, and it's now going off into all kinds of wonderful directions. I'm very happy.
Someone said to me recently, I love people who loves things. And it's so nice to be in the company of someone who so clearly loves something. I think it's true, and I think that's what comes through in the podcast.
Thanks, Con.
Just in terms of the mechanics of that, though, of building the audience, I read an interview you did in 2015, I think it was, where you were talking about, you know, you were sort of weighing up ways of monetizing the podcast, essentially. And I think you were saying at the time, though, you had been approached by a platform that you felt wasn't the right fit. So how did you go about, you know, just taking the steps or beginning to think about, you know, how this could be something that, you know, that could financially support you?
Well, Patreon was in its infancy when I started podcasting, and I thought to myself, that's the kind of model I would want to do. You know, like I could do the main show, and then I could put out bonus shows and more and previews and things on Patreon. But I was also quite aware that, you know, I didn't really have an inbuilt audience yet. Had to build it first. And I was very lucky in my first year of Secret History of Hollywood. I think iTunes featured it on, you know, 10 years of podcasting and movie fanatics thing, and they put me on the front page a couple of times. So I was very lucky with that. I mean, I wouldn't like to say where I'd be now if they hadn't done that. I don't know. And also, you know, of course, Mr. Gatiss heard the show. And he heard the Sherlock Holmes episode, actually, and he got in touch and he was like, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. Have you got any more? And I was like, yeah, I've got Universal Horror. Well, great. So he came back a week later. He was like, you know, oh, I really enjoyed that. Have you got any more? It's like, well, I'm doing one on, I was going to do one on maybe some horror. And he said, do Val Luton. So I was like, oh, okay. And he said, if you do, let me know. So I said, well, would you like to be in it? And he said, yes, I would. Yeah, very much so. So, yeah, he was incredibly sweet. It's a funny story about that too. So I wrote the 12 intros that play before each episode. They're like fairy tales that each film was based on. And I said to him, I've got these things, I'll come down to London, you don't need to go anywhere. He said, great, I'll get a room at my agent's house then, my agent's office, and we'll record it there. So I was supposed to be there at 10 o'clock, and I think the M4 was blocked. So I walked into the office about 1 p.m, I think, and I phoned ahead and said, could you tell him that, you know, I'm going to be late? And they hadn't told him. God bless his heart. He'd been sat there for 3 hours waiting. He wasn't best pleased, but, you know, we talked about Tales of the Unexpected and stuff, and he was fine after that. But, yeah, it was really excruciating embarrassing. Anyway, so yeah, the audience built through those kinds of things, you know, like Mark Gatiss is on the show, so therefore he retweets it, and bosh, you've got, you know, 5-figure downloads all of a sudden. And iTunes feature it and they put it on Twitter, and, you know, bosh, that helps it take off. But I was very aware that before you can make a living at these things, you really do need to build an audience, which is a mistake I see very often with other, not even podcasters, but creators I know, musicians and artists and stuff, who've gone, right, I've made a picture or I've made a song, here's my Patreon. And you watch them get 1 or 2 and then stagnate, and you think to yourself, you kind of you can't really expect people to know you. They don't know who you are yet or what you're capable of, and all these things you might promise them, it doesn't really mean anything to someone when you're this early. I thought, well, I've got a good bank of episodes. I waited 2 and a bit years. I had a good bank of episodes, and people knew the kind of stories I was writing, and, you know, I was able to say, I can give you this each month and this each month, and I set a launch date, and yeah, it just took straight off. And I remember sitting on it for a while thinking, oh, is it time yet? Is it time yet? And yeah, I quit my job at the end of 2018. I was a chef. I was working like ridiculous hours every day, 16 hours or something crazy, and not getting home till 1 a.m, and then sitting up all night writing these shows in my understairs cupboard. But yeah, that was quite a moment. I finished on Christmas Eve 2018. I remember, you know, throwing down the apron, going out to the bar and having a beer with them all, and thinking, oh my God, this is my job now. And I have to say, I mean, none of it would have been possible without, I mean, you're a patron. I'm extraordinarily grateful to everyone who's listened to the show and, you know, still to this day sign up and say, yeah, I believe in you enough to give you a couple of quid a month. And yeah, so it's become an
incredible model, really, isn't it? Because it's the kind of
yeah.
thing that I think if you said it 15 years ago, this is a financial model, you know, we thought, really? But
Yeah, exactly.
it's funny how, and I think, I mean, speaking of from the other side, you know, there there is a sense of involvement that obviously is very minor, and a sense of a kind of emotional commitment to something when that brings its own reward as well. I think from the subscriber's point of view, there is something very
Yeah.
very pleasant about the model. But I wonder, does it, you know, does it then? Do you feel under pressure? Essentially, then does it increase the pressure? Do you know, have content and bonus content, and you run film clubs, and you know you diversify what you offer?
I think definitely, yeah, it has definitely created an extra level of pressure. I do put the patrons above everything else I do, like even above the main podcast. You know, if I've got a choice between writing for Secret History of Hollywood or you know, making a bonus show, it has to be the bonus show. And then you know, I'll just stay up extra late and write on Cary or something. But I think, you know, you could say it's the best thing I've ever done. You could say it's the worst thing I've ever done, because there is that sense of crushing disappointment when suddenly you lose 10 of them and you go, what have I done wrong? And you look at their messages and some of them say, you know, oh, things have changed because of the pandemic. And you go, well, that's understandable, of course. And then you get some who say you're putting out too much content. And you go, wow, what do I do now? Do I put out less? So there is that added level of pressure, definitely. But you know, I've been extraordinarily lucky. That's another reason why I think some of these creators who start patrons too early don't see a massive take up as well, is because if you don't have a following and you don't have like a launch day where you get loads of numbers, people unfortunately look at numbers as a way of authenticating someone. I think it's, you know, the reason that people look at follower numbers on Twitter and Instagram. If someone says, you know, I've got a Patreon, I'm going to give you this amount of content every month, and you go over there and he hasn't got any followers, and you wonder why. Is it bad content, or is it just that he's a no one or something? So I mean, my sister actually is she wants to do a Patreon. I keep saying hold off until you have a good audience. I think it's crucial. You can't just wander in there and say, I'm new, give me all your money. I think you have to make it valuable, and people have to know you and connect with you. I think that's why I do film clubs and things. And like, I always talk to my patrons all day long. You know, if someone sends me a message, I'll be straight on there and back to them, and they become like friends. So it's a way of investing in you personally, I think, and then they're investing in you, not the content.
Sure. Yeah, and that sense of community, as you say, is kind of essential to it, isn't it? I mean, you talk about, actually, again, I saw in that interview you talked about not being a big fan of, or not being particularly active in social media. But I think that's obviously probably something that you have to do. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean,
that was a long time ago, but
yeah, I don't. Do you know what? I'm not very good at selling myself. I can't take compliments. I'm not very good at saying, hey, this is great, listen to this. I just say, here it is, and then just sort of shy away and hope people listen to it. Yeah. So in that way, I'm not very good for social media, because I don't sell myself, and I'm constantly being told I should sell myself more. And I believe I should. It's just, I don't know, something in my psychological makeup just refuses to allow me to believe in myself in that way. So yeah, when it comes to social media, I'm not the greatest person to ask, I have to be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's something that you know is unavoidable as a creator and as a
yeah, especially as a digital creator as well. It has to be. You have to be on it, I think. Yeah, but I do it reluctantly. Very good.
Yeah, I mean, we're slightly running out of time. I don't want to keep it too long. I just wanted to ask. There's a couple of questions I always ask everyone to finish on, but before we do, I'd just like to, because we haven't talked that much about Attaboy Clarence, which is your fantastic regular show that is so much fun and so enjoyable. And yeah, just use, as you said at the start, it kind of, did you use the term palate cleanser for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I love doing it. It's fun, you know. I watch a movie and I go, oh my god, that was unexpectedly brilliant. Like this week, I watched a film called Lost Angel from 1943, which I would never ever have supposed would be as fantastic as it is. It's all about a baby that's brought up in a lab by a team of doctors who decide to take all the emotion out of her upbringing and just bring her up to be this like super kid, basically. And it's a story of how she sort of breaks out and finds this reporter and goes on an adventure with him and discovers the magic in life, you know. But I watched it, I laughed my ass off. I fell in love with the whole thing, and it's the sort of thing that's making me go, oh, I can't wait to talk about that this week. And that's what Attaboy Clarence does for me. It just reinvigorates my love for old movies every week. So.
That's great. That's great. Favorite classic movie?
Oh, this is always a fight between It's a Wonderful Life and Rebecca. It's always one of those two. Yeah, I don't know. It's Rebecca this week, I think. How about you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, It's a Wonderful Life would definitely be up there. I have films that I obsess about that I wouldn't necessarily say, you know, it's not like it's the greatest film ever. There's a film called East Lynne from 1931 that I have become completely obsessed with.
What's it called, sorry?
East Lynne.
East Lynne.
Yeah, no one's seen it. There's only one copy of it in UCLA. And I think it's been on TCM because I managed to buy a really poor DVD copy of it, which missed the last third missing, and it suddenly stopped playing. It won't play anymore. But it's this amazing old melodrama. It was hoary at the time. Like even in 1931, the reviews are like, this is a bit outdated. But there's something about I mean, a bit like I kind of tend to get caught up in films or obsessed with certain films, not necessarily because they're the greatest film ever, but it's sometimes hard to say why. You probably know.
It's almost like they fit at certain times, don't they? It's like when I need a hug, then I'll watch It's a Wonderful Life. When I need to watch some splendor, it's Rebecca. You know, when I want a totally, you know, no antagonist in a movie, I'll watch Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, and it will be the best film ever for that moment in my life at the time. So
I think if I had to pick a film that actually is really, I might go with Shadow of a Doubt. I do love Shadow.
Oh yeah, that's pretty perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. Listen, we're nearly at the end. There's two questions I ask everyone, and
sure, go for it.
The first is, can you, and the answer may be no, can you describe a typical day in your work day?
Work day. So I do some freelance work sort of every day, and it's sort of I can fit it in around my own stuff. So I get up and get that out of the way first, and then I always have a good breakfast, and then get to work on Cary because I have a writing target of three finished pages a day. So sometimes I'll finish that at 1 p.m. because I've stormed it, and sometimes it'll be 11 p.m. It's just not happening. And in between that, I try and have any meetings that come up and try and think about what the next piece of bonus content is. It has no real structure, to be honest. I'm just like, oh crap, I've got to do that next. Oh no, I've forgotten to do that. So yeah, I generally tumble into bed about midnight, all exhausted and disappointed with myself. That's the only common denominator.
That's great. And the last question: what qualities do you think someone has to have to do your job?
Ooh, well, I think you brought up the main quality, which was following your instinct, because I think you really need to drill down and identify why you love doing what you do, and following that all the way to the end, because if not, you will quickly lose patience with it, and it won't be the thing you envisioned or the thing you leave to the world.
I think that's a great way to finish up.
So
no, it's brilliant. Thanks, Adam. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
You too, Con. Thank you.
Yeah. It's been really great, and I look forward very much to to the ongoing adventures of Attaboy and to Cary Part 2. Of course, I've heard some of it, but
thank you very much. Thank you.